For years there's been debate about the prospect of a pulp mill in Tasmania's Tamar Valley. Today the federal government finally gave timber company Gunns the go-ahead. Even though the mill's operating conditions have been tightened, green groups are warning it's not good enough. Martin Cudahy reports from Hobart.
I think it's a very positive day for the organisation, and I'd like to thank Minister Burke and his department. It's been a rigorous process that we've undertaken over the last 12 months, and it's been a long journey.
I think if the company tries to steamroll this along without any public hearing, you'll see the biggest protest since the Franklin Dam, no doubt about that.
It's long been a divisive project, but now, after 7 long years, the timber company Gunns can build Australia's biggest pulp mill in northern Tasmania.
Today I have approved the remaining modules that are required for the environmental approval process for the pulp mill.
The previously media-shy company is delighted its pet project can now proceed.
We acknowledge that there's some people out there in the community that have strong views on this. We'd also acknowledge that there's a lot of people out there who want this project to go ahead as well.
As part of the approval process, Environment Minister Tony Burke has put new, stricter controls in place. The timber company will now have to use a cleaner bleaching process called elemental chlorine-free light technology, and all the trees will come from plantation forests.
No native forestry will be allowed to be legally used through this mill. This is a substantial variation.
Gunns asked for the greener standards to be imposed.
Today we draw a line on the improved conditions that Gunns have sought, on the improved environmental outcomes that have been sought by the company, and from today there are no steps backwards.
By embedding those two issues in the permit, it certainly provided a level of comfort to people that regardless of time, these things will be locked into how the facility operates.
But, as always, the mill's critics remain fiercely opposed.
That's not a tick-off from the people of the Tamar Valley. It's not a tick-off from the Greens, and it won't be.
I don't care who you vote for, but vote against the mill.
One of Australia's most prominent businessmen, Geoffrey Cousins, has long been opposed to the mill. He believes today's approval will spark large-scale protests.
No decent international partner wants to get involved when the concept of social uprising is so alive, and it's more alive now than it was all those years ago.
They do have the right for protest. I think it is one that they need to work in a way that doesn't put people's lives at risk.
A lot of the anger directed at Gunns can be traced to when the mill was first examined by Tasmania's approval body. The company pulled out in 2007 and the then Premier, Paul Lennon, fast-tracked its approval.
That really disenfranchised environment groups and the local community in their capacity to have a proper say in that project.
There's a lot of hype around this which is unnecessary and unhelpful.
At start-up, the mill will produce about 820,000 tonnes of pulp, mainly for export. It will be built alongside an existing wood chip facility on the banks of the Tamar River. The $2.5 billion project will be the largest private investment in the state's history.
Unquestioningly a fan of the project, and unquestioningly a critic of those who would downplay it.
Dr Julian Amos is a botanist, a former forestry minister, and until late last year was the chairman of the Forest Industries Association.
A good project from an environmental point of view, it has as strict a control on it as any other pulp mill project in the world.
There's new fears the Tamar Valley mill could jeopardise the forestry peace deal struck late last year. The signatories agreed on the construction of a pulp mill, but not this one.
We are not necessarily opposed to a pulp mill per se. We do support downstream processing of our plantations in Tasmania, and in terms of that current proposal, on a range of areas it's not up to scratch.
Phil Pullinger is the Director of Environment Tasmania, an umbrella organisation that includes green groups like the Wilderness Society. He's worried about the discharge of effluent, which will be pumped into Bass Strait 3 kilometres offshore.
It's not a proposal that we'll ever be in a position that we'll endorse or support.
And there's another deadline next week. It too is straining the forestry peace deal. Conservationists say, as part of the agreement, certain forests were to be protected by the 15th of March. Come next week, if high conservation value forests are still being logged, does this whole process fall over?
Well, it would seriously jeopardise the capacity of the environment groups to continue to proceed in this process if that moratorium isn't put in place. Yeah, well, the environment groups would have to consider suspending our involvement.
Even if the deal falls over, Gunns has the approval it's been seeking for years. But construction is no sure thing. One final challenge remains before the earth will be broken.
The final barrier has been overcome from a regulatory point of view, so it's back to the company now to find the finance and to get on with the job.
Martin Cudahy there from Hobart.